I'm Liz.
I'm Robby. Welcome back to our channel Bookworm Couple. Today we are going to be talking about the third book in the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan, The Mark of Athena. I almost forgot the title for a second there, but we got it. Yeah, so now we're over halfway through this series, which feels crazy.
I mean, there are 5?
Kind of. There are 5, yeah.
Okay. This is only a third. Why do I feel like we're farther along?
I don't know.
Because the books are long? I don't know.
The books are a bit longer, sure. And I guess we can start there. I do still think that the longer page count, the higher word count, or whatever you want to call it, is something that I'm still struggling with, or maybe Riordan is still struggling with it. It's just, there's always points in each one of these books so far that we've read that I'm like, I don't know that this needed to be here.
Yeah, and
that's
I
not
also
something
feel like
really
I've been getting burnt out by like 50% of the book. I'm like, okay, I'm over it now. And I don't know why, and I think maybe it is because I agree with you of like, so some of the like side quests and stories are phenomenal, and then other ones are...
My biggest problem with this book, and I liked this book a lot. I will say that this book also, no spoilers yet, but this book also ended on the biggest cliffhanger that has been in any book I've read.
Which I actually loved.
Which is
really
amazing.
loved.
But it does feel like, partially, like basically the whole book was just set up for that one moment, which isn't a great thing to feel, because it's obviously it's such a huge thing that happens, but it's like far and away the biggest thing that happens, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But for me, in a book where they're supposed to be going to a specific location, again, no spoilers yet, they don't get there till kind of late in the book. And I was like really excited for them to get there in the pretty early on. And when we were on like our third side quest, I was just like, some of this is good, but I just want to get there.
I agree with you. I felt weird describing to myself in my head that this book felt slow, because there was a lot happening, but it did feel slow. Like I struggled to stay in it. Because I agree with you. I was ready for that destination. And I do also think this time around, and I don't know if it's just me or like the book, I think I maybe have a very specific type of humor. And obviously I know these are written for a younger audience, but even when I was younger, I don't know that I was really one to like love the like really silly, the like style of humor that it is. It just doesn't, I don't really find it funny. And I think a lot of the side quests really honed in on that, whereas like I liked it, but it was like I could have done with 3 pages less of it, like the little bits and things.
Sure.
But I think that may also just be a personal preference, also like my age currently.
Yeah.
But that's like a thing that I found myself kind of, I don't know, slowing me down a little bit.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the positive side though, I do think the standouts in this were I think Annabeth, which is great, because it is, I think just from the title you can assume it's going to be
I was so pumped.
her book.
I was like, oh, a girl is getting a book.
But for me also Leo.
I was about to say Leo. Yeah, I was like, and this was Leo's book also.
To me in this book,
huge moments for Leo.
His side quests, his subplots, and just his character. I think
that
he is the best
emotional growth.
Yes, I think he is the best written character other than
completely
Percy.
agree.
I think I don't know about the best written character, but I think he's the one who Riordan has the clearest voice for.
And I think it's actually funny that you say that, and I say that just talking about the humor, because he is so much of that humor. But I actually I find when we got more heart from Leo and more of like his family's backstory, and kind of watching him watch that and like make commentary on who he is, the humor started hitting for me a little bit more, a little bit differently. But no, I completely agree with you. I was thinking that as I finished this book, I was like, this is Annabeth's book and Leo's book. Like, this is also very much Leo's book.
Absolutely. But all that being said, I think we can probably start jumping into the actual...
The Mark of Athena.
Yeah, okay, so if you haven't read the book yet, spoilers going forward, you can watch our videos on the first 2 books in the series up here somewhere, but otherwise I would say pause it, come back when you've read the book. We'll still be here. But anyway, so where do you want to start? Anything in particular you want to spoil right out the gate?
The first thing that came to mind is Leo being super awesome hot Leo.
Yes, yeah,
that was
funny.
And again, funny that I like commented on the humor. But I will say that I think it lasted a bit long for me, but I was cackling. I thought that was
Yeah, it was really good.
So funny. The delivery of the just like really bad acting of it, I thought was very funny.
Team Leo, baby. Team Leo all the way.
He's like, I'm so great. I'm so awesome. That's jumping right in. Anyways, you can go back to them, but it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's the first thing that came to mind. Obviously the most memorable part for me.
Yeah. I mean, I really liked the way this book started off. I mean, because it picks up right where the last one ended, which was also a bit of a cliffhanger. And, you know, I like spending time in Camp Jupiter. Wait, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Camp Jupiter. Yeah, I don't know why I doubted that. I like spending time in Camp Jupiter, and I was really excited for us to, like, be there with everyone. And then they kind of got out of there pretty quick, which, you know, the only reason I have a problem with that is because they were like, oh, let's move, plot's going, like, crazy stuff is happening. But then it feels like we hit, like, a wall really fast. And that bummed me out, because I was like, okay, if we're leaving Camp Jupiter so fast, like, there's got to be great reasons for it. And it's just like, no, we're going on a bunch of, like, fetch quests, essentially. Not actually fetch quests.
Which is interesting, because I feel like so much of these books matured from the first one, which makes sense because the kids are older, this is a different audience. But then, I think you've mentioned this before, it's a similar recipe as the Percy Jackson books, where it's like, little side quest, silly side quest, silly side quest. Whereas, like, our characters are having these big emotional beats, there's a lot of romance, there's a lot of history.
There's a ton of romance.
There's a lot of, like, more mature moments happening, and so I think that is exactly what got me, like, distracted and, like, kind of lost the momentum for me, because, like, I was like, why are we in these silly...
Yeah, I mean, and the thing, and, like, I understand why they went to each place. You know, they had to go to each place to find out something new to help them figure out what exactly they needed to do, or they needed something to, like, repair the ship after, you know, they were attacked in Camp Jupiter and Leo was possessed and stuff. All of that... It just feels like they could have cut out one or two stops without really much trouble.
Or made them a little bit snappier. I do think there still is that bit from, like, the original books where it's like, we're giving you kind of a lesson in
which I
Greek and Roman history, which is fun. But I do think they kind of get a little
There were more gods in this one that showed up. I loved seeing Bacchus. Because Dionysus is one of my favorites, and the fact that he misnamed Jason
phenomenal
made me laugh. It's like the dumbest bit, and I always laugh at it. And he's drinking Diet Pepsi. I just thought it was so great.
Instead of Diet Coke, phenomenal. Little bits and pieces.
But anyway, so I mean, I liked the beginning in Camp Jupiter when they're meeting all the people, and Beth and Raina get to talk.
We get the lovers coming
back together. There's a ton of romance in this. There's so much about it is romantic, which is great. And shows, you know, kind of the aging up of the characters as well as the implied aging up of the readers as well as you grow with these characters. Percy and Annabeth are absolutely solid.
Love them.
Yeah, I love them. I will say over the course of this book, I didn't love how Frank was treated. I feel like he was written as a bit dumber than he was in the last book.
And he also didn't really get a moment.
I mean, he got to turn into a dragon when they were escaping Camp Jupiter, which was really super cool.
To be honest, I missed it. I was like, it happened so fast. I was like, wait a minute, what was he?
He was a dragon.
He was a dragon, which
I kind of hoped he was going to do in the last book, but I think he turned into a bear or something like that.
Turned into a bear again in this one. I mean, we can talk about talking about Leo. It was with Nemesis that she I thought that the whole sequence was very heartbreaking, where she's like, you're the seventh wheel. There's nobody here for you. Yeah. Nobody cares about you. And I think that's really when we started his, like, journey forth.
Yes, absolutely.
And I guess we can talk about couples, because everyone's coupled off except for our poor boy Leo.
So I guess we can start with him. I mean, his most of his plot line in this book has to do with him being the seventh wheel, like you said. I mean, there's him being possessed in the beginning and doubting his own abilities and things like that, but for the most part, it's about him being alone, and Nemesis is kind of prophecy for him, I guess, for lack of a better term. Also, random side note, there's a ton of callbacks to the original Percy Jackson series in this one. They reference Monster Donut from Sea of Monsters. The Nemesis referenced taking Ethan Nakamura's eye, which we never even see happen. There was something else that I wrote down. I was just like, there's just a ton of these, which I thought was kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, Leo has so many interesting and heartbreaking moments, and because we get to be in his head in this book, which is so great, you get to see how he's struggling with being alone like that. And
it's interesting, too, because you very much see that his humor is his coping mechanism, and that's how he has found like people love him,
Mhm.
and it's interesting to have the flashback we have with Hazel where he sees his
That was
great-great-grandfather.
Yeah, that was so sad.
It was so sad, but it was also really like, it was interesting because like Leo's first thing was like, who is this cool guy? I can't be related to this cool guy who like very much similarly used humor to avoid bullying and like to get people out, like get out of these people's heads. And it was interesting to watch like Leo like admire him, but also like I think later in the book you kind of saw him settle into it a little bit of like that's who he is also. He is that like over the top, joyful comic relief, but also really, really smart and really, really useful. And yeah, that was really heartbreaking, but in a great way. I loved it. I thought it was very well done.
Yeah, I really loved everything that happened with Leo in this, and then towards the back half of the book with the Archimedes spheres.
Yeah,
and stuff.
And he's just like nerding out.
Yeah, I mean, I thought everything. The only thing that I was bummed about was like their escape from the trap at the end of the book was not shown. He just said like in like a paragraph like we got out of there, and I was like, this is like, and this was my problem with the pacing. It's like we don't have time to show that. But we have the time to do this Hercules thing that which sucked because I was like, oh cool, Hercules, and that whole part was one of my least favorite bits of the book.
No,
so
I actually just forgot it happened.
It's just like I didn't really care about any of it. Like there was some good stuff with Piper in there, but I didn't really. I was just like, okay, Hercules is a dick, and you're gonna get a cornucopia, and okay.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was that and the Atlanta one were kind of I think my least favorite stopovers. I was just like, what are we doing here? But one of my favorite ones was with the Mer people camp. That was so funny.
Not the centaur people.
Not with the like the sea centaur. I don't know.
I forget they have.
And then the sea centaurs and they train mermaid heroes.
Yeah.
And Afros, the really buff one, is like teaches like music and poetry.
Yeah.
I was like, this is great. I want a book about these guys.
Truly. And then eventually, I also love that it's funny that Percy's like, why didn't they want to?
Well, which I mean, and I also I kind of loved that about we don't get. Percy isn't like the biggest part of this book by any means, which I think is good. It should be Annabeth. And also Percy's already got his own series, so he's fine. But I did really like what they did with Percy in this book and like the struggles that he was having with being like, I am the defender, I am the strongest person, and dealing with Jason, who's also kind of that guy.
A counterpart on the other.
And not really understanding like how he fits in or like being able to let his friends take care of themselves, but also his anxiety with suffocating, I thought was fascinating. That was the only real bit of the Atlanta side quest that I liked, when he was really dealing with like, I'm walking through the Atlanta aquarium and like being afraid of the water, which I really, really enjoyed. So there were some aspects of the Percy. I don't think they did a ton with Percy, but I liked what they did do.
I agree. Percy felt he felt very like, this is an established character and this is just the next note.
Yes.
You know, this is just like a little bit.
Exactly. And I like that him and Jason got to fight, because we all knew we wanted to see it, and having them be possessed was a really good way to make that happen.
For sure.
And then them both being like, well, I mean, I could have...
I'm the strongest Avenger.
Which was very funny. But I feel like we should talk about Annabeth last, since it's
that's book. Fair. Yeah, so do you want to go back to Hazel and Frank?
Yeah, we can do Hazel and Frank. Sure.
Love Hazel.
Love Hazel.
Give Hazel her own
She's
book.
great.
She's so cute.
She was so interesting, and like, it's not really explicitly explained anywhere, but like the way she is clearly dealing with hanging out with Leo or hanging out with Frank at different points in the book. Like, she spends a lot of time purposely putting herself with Leo in the beginning of the book, which I thought was really interesting. And it's not really explained from her point of view, but I do think it's a very interesting choice for the character.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and also like even to points where she'll like bring him along as well with her and Frank, because she's like, she can't let go of this memory and this connection. And I think that's a more realistic human nature thing than like, I'm gonna choose one, even though like her and Leo aren't romantically involved, but she has that connection with him, his family, and while she is also trying to be conscious of Frank, she's also very much being like, this is just what I need. Like,
Yeah.
this is what I need, and this is what we're doing.
Yeah.
And I think that's really strong and powerful. And I am glad we got at least one of her flashbacks, because I
Me too.
enjoyed
I
those
love
so
her
much
flashbacks.
in the last book.
I do think both her and Frank, obviously suffer a bit from the fact that neither of them are POV characters in this book. I think Frank much more so than Hazel. I think because,
because all we got from him was like jealous boyfriend.
Yes, which like I understand, but they also made him the butt of so many jokes, which he was a lot in I think like the last book as well. But we got his POV and we got to see him grow and stuff. And this book, it feels like, yeah, he's a bit more confident in his powers, but we don't get to see his perspective on anything. And so really all we do get is him being constantly jealous of Leo and worried about his relationship with
and
Hazel.
for not having actually anything for that to have built upon.
Yeah.
Like, beyond the fact that they found, like, that, like, Hazel somehow thought he was someone that she knew in his past, and that's like, basically all we have to go upon that Frank is jealous of.
Yeah.
Which just is dumb.
Yeah, I didn't, so I felt bad
but
about that.
I'm also not 16, so.
Because I liked Frank.
I did too. I loved him in the last book.
And I thought his storyline in the last book was great, and it just feels like he was sidelined a bit by the bigger personalities that are. He did very much
feel like a caricature too, because they even like made a few jokes about his like matching sweatsuit sets and him being like big guy.
Yeah.
And whereas I feel like we obviously know that he's this like big, athletic, delightful teddy bear, we didn't, like you said, get any inside of that, so it just kind of made him look dumb, and I don't think the character is dumb at all.
I don't. I think another thing also is everyone except for Jason, really, is kind of like a pretty big character. Frank specifically is a pretty soft character, kind of passive, and so us not getting his POV makes him fall way back.
Yeah.
Because he's just kind of a softer voice in the group. But I did like that he started sharing his secret with other people, and I did love the fact that him and Leo did start bonding over their shared trauma and their loss of their mother, or the loss of their family in the fire. And the obvious, at least in my opinion, foreshadowing that Leo is gonna like encase his firewood in metal or find some way to
Leo's
protect
like,
it.
Why didn't
Leo's
you
like,
do this?
wait. Leo like starts thinking about it very briefly, and I'm like, okay, Leo's gonna find a way. And so like I know that they're gonna reconcile, but I felt a little bit bad for Frank. Not as much for Hazel, also because Hazel was so intrinsically linked to this. Well, one of the centers of this plot, which is the fact that Nico was stolen, but nothing really comes of it, honestly.
You know who needs their own book? Nico.
Yes.
Nico.
And that was actually one thing I was just like, Nico, when they find him, they just like roll him out and it's like, okay.
They really do.
Which
and
I
he's
was
like,
just
I didn't know if you guys were gonna come or what.
And that was one thing, like she...
I feel like Nico has almost always had that treatment, though.
True.
Like the side treatment.
Nico and, like, rescuing Nico and Annabeth's own plot were basically the two main plots of this, but the Nico one just kind of, like, as soon as it's resolved-ish, or at least as soon as they, like, get him out of the jar, it's just over, and there's nothing that's really talked about, which is a bummer. Oh.
I think also, like you said, how we got the like, biggest moment in this book was the cliffhanger at the end, whereas also we had, like, 2 seconds with Nico to make, it's a big deal. They're like, Nico, you have to come find us. And, like, that's a huge moment.
Yes.
Huge moment. And we, like, Nico's, like, just woken up. We've barely gotten anything from him. Again, maybe I just want more of Nico, because I think Nico's...
My thing also, and I felt this in most of... Well, I felt this in Heroes of Olympus, and not in the original Percy Jackson. People kind of treat Nico like crap.
Yeah,
like, there's even bits where, like, Percy's like, I don't know, I don't trust that kid. I'm like, what are you talking about?
He's a cool emo kid. What do you want?
There's
He's a sad
like,
boy.
Like the fact that like Jason and Frank, I don't remember, not Frank, Jason and Leo maybe,
well,
were like, well, we're gonna maybe rescue Nico at some point. I'm like, why is this even a conversation?
I'm wondering if
it's
the distrust of the child of Hades that is.
Well, but Hazel's one too.
I know, but I'm wondering if that's what, like, the underlying theme Rick Riordan was trying to make of like the distrust. Because I agree with you, and he always kind of gets treated like crap. And mind you, like, I do think when he comes into the world, he does some kind of crappy things, but not enough to make me feel like this is a bad
I mean, I know
kid.
what at least Percy's thing is like, he's like, you knew that both these camps existed, and when you met me, you didn't tell me that we knew each other when I had lost my memory. And I understand that.
It's a long game, though.
But then, I don't know. It just feels like that's not resolved. I'm like, there are like moments in the first series, specifically at the end of one of the books. I remember this big, well, not a big, a small moment that really resonated with me, where Percy's like, "Hey, you can just be a kid." And I know I talked about that in one of our previous videos, and I think that that's a huge moment. Like, Percy's like a brother to him, or like, especially after his sister died.
Yeah. Well, and also our sweet little
very
Nico.
odd.
He is just like a sweet little boy. Like the fact that he like also rescued Hazel from the underworld.
Yeah.
Because he's like, oh, sister. Like all he wants is love and companionship and friendship. And people keep kind of, brushing him off, which is a bummer. But also he's so obviously going to sacrifice himself in the next book. I can just feel it coming.
Anyway, who else have we haven't talked about Jason and Piper.
Jason and Piper. We don't get a whole lot of them.
Don't get a ton of
We
them.
get a decent amount of Piper's POV, which I liked, and a lot of it was her being like, Annabeth, respect, that's my bestie. And I love that.
Which I thought was interesting, but I also
I
wish,
love it.
like, there's a bit in the beginning of the book, I think. There's a lot of, like, telling and not showing in this book, where, like, Annabeth comes up and steals her breakfast. And then there's a little thing, she's like, we've been doing this for a while, it's an inside joke. And I was like, what? Like, why don't you just have some scenes?
Go to camp.
Like, why don't you just have some scenes with them together where they talk and like kind of do stuff.
Very good.
I thought that was very weird because you're right. It is a lot of like her and Annabeth are kind of on the same page. They're also dating the same archetype of person.
But I do think it's funny. A lot of the like in Piper's head, it's very much of that like girls amping up girls vibe, which is fun because she's like my best friend Annabeth, so smart.
Yes.
Literally the smartest person you've ever met, which I think is really cute. But you're right. Like it would have been nice to have some like cute cozy moments of them at camp. Just like in the moment rather than like in their heads, so much.
I also think, I don't know, we don't get a ton of Piper or Jason. Jason goes through a lot of the same stuff as Percy, which is like, I'm supposed to be the strong guy and now I don't know what to do. And it is fair that Jason does get beat a bunch in this book.
He does.
Like, he really does. And so, like, I think they focused that more on him because Percy had other things that he was focusing on. But the thing with Piper that I think is interesting is she spends not a lot, but a good amount of this book being like, everyone can do all these cool things and all I can do is like charm speak people and it's absolutely useless. I think Piper is terrifying.
So cool.
The scene where there are a few like semi-horror aspects in this book that I really enjoyed, and one of them was when she forced the like possessing the Eidolons. Yeah, however you say it. Is that
That's how he says it in the
Eidolons? The Eidolons out of there. That scene was chilling.
Yeah, she's awesome.
And
she's a powerful chick.
I think she's really cool.
Yeah, I agree.
And her and it's the same thing like when Aphrodite showed up in this book, I got really excited because I loved when she showed up in whatever the last book was she showed up in.
She's like, my girl!
Yes,
like
we got
a
more,
drunk tea party.
Yes, exactly. And so it was less...
Aphrodite's sipping Chardonnay.
Yeah, exactly. It was much more stereotypical Aphrodite as opposed to the last one where it was like, love is this, love is that, and the power of, like, her action, how powerful she actually is, yeah. But anytime you really, like, dive into the kind of powers that her children have and the kind of powers that Piper have, I always think it's like really the most interesting. So I like Piper. So I liked Piper and Jason in this. I feel like neither of them had like huge moments to shine. I mean, Jason and Percy finally like working together at the end with the giants.
They're funny. And there was something Percy said at the end. It was like in the middle of his POV where kind of similarly like you said of him being like, oh man, I don't really know what my friends need from me. And he's like, and Jason even got to meet his half brother. And I'm like, that's really cool, but he was a jerk.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean I liked that the obvious arc for him and Percy was like they have to work together and showing their powers come together and them making like a storm was really cool. But I didn't like that like the culmination of that was them fighting the giant together for Bacchus to make Bacchus like help them.
And Bacchus comes in and is like boop and kills them.
Yes, I liked that, but the way that they won was the Argo came in and blew everything up. Yeah. And that also happened with Annabeth's plotline at the end, and I was like, you kind of like are hamstringing yourself with these with like the themes here when like okay they're finally doing it but then they still lost and then the Argo came and blew everything up and then Bacchus was like yeah okay I'll come help you and I was just like okay like literal Deus Ex Machina style, which makes sense for, you know, the type of book this is.
Yeah.
And Greek and
Literally,
Roman mythology. Yeah. But very literal Deus Ex Machina a lot in this book. Shall we talk about Annabeth?
Annabeth.
I mean, this is very much her book, and
She's powerful and strong.
appreciate the fact that it is very much her book from start to finish.
No, I agree.
Like, I think the first chapter is an Annabeth POV. One of my favorite parts of the whole book is when she finally goes off on her own and, like, does the Mark of Athena, like, follows the path of the Mark of Athena. It's like 5 or 6 Annabeth chapters in a row.
It is, and I loved how it started, too, because she's, like, in here and she's like, all my friends, similar to Piper, it's like, all my friends have these powers, like, what can I do? And she's like, I'm smart.
I'm really smart, yeah.
Like, goes into it, because she's like, Leo would do this, so-and-so would do this, they would do this, well, what would I do? Well, I'm smart. Okay, I'm smart. Like, that, which I thought was really well done. And I agree with you.
Yeah, I really liked that we got
so powerful.
That we got a bunch of her, and then we didn't get her for a very long time after she met Arachne, who, speaking of those horror elements, the description of her is terrifying, really horrifying. And the way that she has to face her fears and all these different ways, I really enjoyed the entire journey that she went on. I just, again, wish that it hadn't been solved by the Argo blowing a bunch of stuff up. And I understand that, like, if it's a massive statue, obviously that's what has to happen, I guess.
Yeah.
But if that was...
I mean,
if,
for
like,
the most part, she did it herself.
She did it all on her own.
Capturing her and tricking her. And again, I thought that was, like, her figuring out that the bridge was a like, loom. And she had to, like, weave her way across. And then, again, like, using her wits to talk this Arachne into trapping herself, which was
with
just
that with the
Chinese finger trap.
Chinese finger trap, which was such a
I also love that
stupid,
Frank comes
funny
out and
thing.
he's like, "Why is this Chinese?" I'm like, "Great question,
yes,
Frank."
great question, Frank. And him, and I do appreciate that one aspect of him, like, being being kind of dumb was, and he's
and
like,
he comes to
show me?
Annabeth, he's like, everyone else makes me feel stupid.
You're the only one I trust to not make fun of me for this.
Yeah.
Which was really sweet and interesting because they never really interacted before.
No. I also loved that once we got to Rome, I think every character that had a POV was like, oh my god, if Annabeth were here, she'd be freaking out over the architecture.
Yes.
There was like multiple people like quoted, they're like, Annabeth would be obsessed with this right
yes.
now. And I do think it's funny that, I guess I'm a little disappointed we weren't in Rome longer.
Yes.
Because all of our experiences there were like dates. It was like a cute date with like Annabeth.
And like a Roman holiday reference, which I was like, what? Okay.
It took me a minute to be like, oh, got it. But then like Jason and Piper also have like a date too. Which like is cute, but I almost wish like we would have gotten there in the beginning of the book, had that, and then had some adventures. Where like at the end of the book it felt like, why are we slowing down? Why are we sitting down and having a Coke and a pizza? Let's go.
I liked when we got to Rome. I do wish that we had gotten there faster.
Yeah, because I wanted to have those moments. Because like, of course, if you're 16 and you're in Rome with your cutie cute, you're gonna want to have a cute romantic moment. But at that point, I was like, you guys, we gotta go. We gotta get Nico's dying. Like hours.
Yeah, Nico's dying.
Why are we stopping right now?
Yeah.
Wanted it, didn't feel like the timing was right.
Yes. The only part about her plotline and POV that I didn't love, and this was just like the whole setup of the way that this worked, I was just like, okay, I understand, like, the stakes require that you set it up this way. I just think it's a bit over the top. Was the fact that her and Jason both knew that it was the Athena Parthenos, whatever. They knew it was the statue.
Yeah.
And they were acting like it was this big thing. It was just say it's the statue. I don't know why we have
kind of felt that too,
pretend
because
it's a secret.
I literally was like, what are we, a statue? Oh great, like we've had so many quests at this point, like what about that is like...
Well, and the thing was, like, the whole point of it, I think, was like, well, we're afraid that once this is revealed, like, we're never going to be able to work together. But it's clear that two people from those two different factions already know, and neither of them is like, I want to kill the other person because I know it. So... and I get it that obviously they both don't know that that's how the other person feels. But it just, as a reader, I was just, and I mean, to be fair, I have read this before and I knew it was a statue. But I was just, even on my first read, I'm sure I was just kind of like, okay.
Well, that's
cool.
how I felt on my first read. I was like, a statue. Okay.
Yeah.
Why are we making a big, why are we being so
like, it's cool, it's a famous statue, and like, it's a big deal that it's found, and I get that part.
Yeah, I agree with you.
But the fact that it was hidden the whole book, I was like, okay.
I think the Athena Minerva thing could have been done a little bit better, because I think that's kind of what the point was, to be like, look at this treatment that this war goddess got.
Yes.
And it was just not, it was there in like bits and pieces, but it never really like, I made that connection. So like, this sucks. Like the way that they took down this literal like goddess, female, badass. Can I say badass?
Sure.
Okay, great. Badass female, which I love, then just got turned into this like dumb idiot. And then, you know, when Rome took over, which
calling
like,
Minerva a dumb idiot is a bit much. But sure.
Well, but that's kind of how they like made it up. They're like, well, they took away all of these like powerful things about her, and I think that was kind of the point, but it didn't really hit for me as much as it could have.
And I think part of that was because of the way that he decided to structure this, which was like secrets, because there has to be some sort of secret in these books, it turns out. But her talking, well, her POV being like, oh, that I got chills or felt dread thinking about like my last interaction with my mother, and then not revealing what it was for a very long time. I think it might have been more interesting if she had run into her a few times.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I completely agree.
To like see both aspects of God, to like to just get a little bit more, like, because we get all the information, but I don't know, Riordan, I like how Riordan writes the gods and their personalities, and almost every time one of them shows up, exception being kind of, I don't really care about like when Hercules showed up in this one, but otherwise, almost every time a god shows up, I'm like, at the end of the scene, I'm like, that was great.
Yeah.
And I think it would have been really cool to have her actually seeing her mom or getting visions from her mom or whatever throughout this. And I understand the point was like her mom's kind of lost it because she cannot reconcile like her two different aspects. Yeah. And so it makes her go insane. And I get that, but I don't know. I think it would have been stronger if we had more of her.
Yeah, no,
and had a little bit more of that explained. We never mentioned
the giants were stupid. I liked that they're obsessed with performing.
I did like, twins. Yeah, I did.
The narrator also did their voices very much a la Jim Carrey and The Grinch, so I think I was 10 times as excited by them.
I liked them. I thought I mean, sometimes the humor works for me, sometimes doesn't. That humor worked for me.
Same.
I thought that was very funny.
Because they're just stupid, over the top. Also, we're actors, so like, or we're actors. And so a lot of that always like gets me. There's a quote at the end where he's like, oh, like, Piper, you understand. And she's like, my dad was an actor. He's like, everyone thinks they're an actor. It was very funny, very over the top.
I liked that a lot.
It was funny, but it did feel childish at times, but they were very much, that's kind of how we've had those, those kind of characters.
But kind of flip side of that, the Piper and Jason thing with the nymphs, that again, sort of horror-y, very terrifying.
Like black
Percy again dealing with drowning and his fear of that. Yeah, like that. And that's when the cornucopia becomes relevant, but at the same time I'm like, whatever, I really didn't like that Hercules bit. I was just like, I don't care about this. Another thing we didn't talk about is this, I liked the way Reyna was used in this book, and her specific connection to Annabeth, and the fact that they spoke multiple times, and they really related to each other.
Once again, they were like, respect.
Yes, exactly. And, you know, the fact that she, when they're in South Carolina?
Great question.
Whatever. When they're on that, like, Civil War base, I believe it was, where Aphrodite shows up, and she is like, I can't stop, like, I'll let you go, but I can't stop, they're gonna attack Camp Half-Blood. I liked that because it was, like, a real ramping up of the stakes. How did you feel about it?
What do you mean? Like her and Reyna communicating?
No, like, specifically, like, okay, we're adding this aspect of, okay, now they're not just chasing us, now they're just going to go try and blow up Camp Half-Blood.
I didn't care about it. It just felt very much, the way that it was referenced just felt like, oh yeah, that. And so that's kind of how my brain did it. I was like, oh yeah, that. I forgot that was happening. It didn't seem like, the stakes didn't seem very high to me, but maybe that was just because, I don't know why it was. I think also because we had the character of Reyna, who was like very grounded and like very much of being like, this is just what I gotta do. And then also her, and what's that other guy's name? Octavian. Because he's kind of a maniac.
I think that...
But I don't feel like we got a lot of him. I think had I gotten more of his POV, it would have been a more scary idea.
I think Octavian is scary.
Horrifying.
I think that the fact that Riordan uses him as the butt of a joke a bunch is a bit of a shame, because I think he could easily be a truly terrifying villain.
Cult
because that's what he is.
Yeah.
And he's seized control of the Roman legions from Reyna, essentially. Even though he's not a traitor, he has whipped them up into a frenzy because he's, a crazy religious nut, essentially. And so I want more Octavian, to be honest. He
No,
sucks and I hate him.
I agree with you, and that's why I think because there wasn't a lot of him with those that like them trying to take Camp Half-Blood, I wasn't as scared of it.
Yeah. And I mean, I think part of the reason, I don't know why that scene really stood out to me, and I just really like Reyna, is there is so much romance in these books, and Reyna stands out as someone who is like, her relationship with romance and and power, and the fact that she's like, she basically offered herself to Percy. We know that she liked Jason, but we don't, but based on the way that she offered herself to Percy, we don't know if it's because she actually liked him or if she just wants
love.
she just
wants love.
Well, not even that, just wants like stability and like the unified front of having both people in power also be together. I just think she's a very interesting character.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really cool observation.
But then I guess we should talk about the very end of the book, which was, a thrilling sequence, probably the most thrilling sequence I think I've read in the series. It's wild.
I loved that it was Annabeth and Percy at the end.
Yes, exactly.
And how he was like, I'm going with you, and I was like, oh, romance.
Yes, so much romance. They're going to Tartarus, and like the way that they they're just like, we're going in, and, we're going to the Doors of Death, and you guys will find us.
And that's why I loved like Percy was like had that trust of Nico. He was like, you have to come find us. This is like this is what's happening now. Like I trust you to come, and I thought that was really heartwarming and also like crazy and scary, but like very exciting.
Yeah, I think that it does overshadow the entire book, but the moment's that good. It's crazy.
Well, and I also think because the lead up was really good, where like you said, it was like we were with Annabeth, then we were with everybody, and then we were with everybody else,
and then
we went back to
together.
Annabeth, and like it feels like we've won, and then all of a sudden it's like literally falling down.
And just the fact that it's Percy and Annabeth is so perfect.
It was
like
so
it couldn't
perfect.
be anyone
My
else.
heart went, oh.
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah. I adore it. I think it's phenomenal.
I adore it.
And I think that's where we should probably skip. I don't know if we can really talk about anything else after that insane moment of them falling into Tartarus.
Also, sorry, this was a little scatterbrained.
It was very scatterbrained. Here we are. So what do you want to rate this out of? I think it's pretty obvious, but
a Mark of Athena?
Well, I was going to say the statue.
The statue, yeah.
Sure.
Also, you could do a Horn of Plenty. That might be easier to find. You want a statue?
Yeah, I'll find some statue of Athena and that'll be fine. Or just some vague statue.
It is a statue. Well, maybe you can add. She's like holding something, isn't she?
I think she has the shield and she has something else, like maybe like a spear. I don't know.
We can talk about it.
How many statues of Athena would you give this out of 5?
I would give this 3.5.
3.5.
What about you?
I would give this a 4 out of. I feel like I talked a lot about the things I didn't like about this book. I really did like this book. My only issue is that I think the second book did a much better job of like weaving a compelling narrative. Yeah, pacing. Because
that to me is why it was a slightly more lower rating, because I think many things happen in this book are great. I love these characters, but it did not hold my attention, which was a bummer.
Yeah, I also think like if I had to rank the books so far, my favorite, Son of Neptune, this would be after that, and then after that would be the first book, The Lost Hero. Wow. And I gave that a 4, and I definitely don't want to give this less because this is my second favorite of the series so far. And I think that the highs of this book were extremely high, and I think some of the character work was some of the best. I really think that the character work specifically with Leo in this book is some of the best that Riordan has done in any of the books he's written. So there's stuff I really loved about this book. I do just think the pacing is still...
Yeah, it was a struggle for me.
Was a struggle.
Which was a bummer.
Yeah. So those are our thoughts. Those are our thoughts.
Were you shipping?
Yeah, there's no like extra ships in this.
There's not.
Yeah.
Unless you're shipping Hazel and Leo. And
I
not
guess.
Hazel and Frank, but that would be sad.
No. Leo's gonna end up with like
some hot nip.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say too.
Mm-hmm.
What were your favorite parts of this book? Were there any bits that we did not talk about in the video that you loved so much? Let us know in the comments down below. We'd love to talk about it. Otherwise, thank you all so much for watching, and
we'll see you on our next adventure.